During humanity's times of speculation, believed there was different creatures out there. Sometimes they would make light of the situation and spectate some of the weirdest sentient species across the universe. No one at that time could have expected that a simple joke that someone made up for entertainment, something that was made into cartoons, could be true. On a planet inside the Euphrates systems, there is little more than a giant mud ball of a planet. This planet was once covered by lush rainforests. Even though it was wet usually, it was still covered in foliage, but the fighting had churned up so much that most of the planet is just now nothing more than mud. The foliage had been destroyed or burned off, and as entire armies and all their machineries moved across, they churned everything into, well, nothing but mud. The human recon team could actually hear cries from assistance from both sides as they got into the systems, yet they looked, and sure enough, there was not a single ship in orbit. At least, not one intact anyway. Not one in the system outside of the human ships could possibly come to reach them. Realizing the severity of the situation, the human recon group immediately called for reinforcements, as just one small recon team was not going to be able to handle any of this. It didn't take long for other ships to show up, eventually bringing a fairly large complement of medical ships with them, and also some cargo ships for a specific purpose. When humanity called down to the planet, both sides received the same message and were stunned as they received this hologram. They looked at this strange bipedal creature with almost no fur. As they looked at it, they were completely confused, yet not as confused as the humans when they received the messages back. They weren't sure if their confirmation was going to be true or not, but it was. However, along with the strange visuals, neither side on the planet wanted to stand down, yet they don't have much of a choice in this moment. They realize that they're both on the edge of dying from starvation, from going septic, from all the lack of hygiene and everything else on the planet. So eventually, they agree. But as they do, they begin to demand that the humans only aid their side and only theirs. They received a message back that said, "That's not how this works. It's either both or none." A simple message, which didn't take long for both sides, though extremely hesitant, ended up realizing how they were all dead soon if they didn't do anything. So parking their pride, they simply stood down if they could receive any aid. As soon as this message was received, the human ships came down in mass. You could see two distinct groups fairly close to each other, but obviously going to different landing zones as they slowly, very slowly, made planetfall. They slowly lowered without much sound at all, no thrusters blaring or anything like that. They descended and extended their landing struts, but very quickly soon found out that the entire area was nothing but a mud hole. As several ships sank deep into the mud all the way up to their hull, more than one ship actually had to raise themselves back up, aborting the landing, lifting off and trying to find any place they could land these large ships, and try to land somewhere, but due to the soggy terrain, this was difficult, yet doable. What humanity found on the surface when they finally disembarked their ships absolutely shocked them, and then it made them burst out laughing. Standing in the rain, it was confirmed why the planet had been torn apart. They'd been fighting like cats and dogs across the entire planet, literally. Both species are of similar height, standing about 3 to 4 feet in height, and look like they came right out of a bad CGI movie. Standing on two legs, usually each side, approached the humans with hesitation, but it was difficult to tell them apart at first because they were all just caked in dirt. These feline and canine sentients were just absolutely covered from head to toe in mud. It was difficult to tell them apart, even from the subordinates to the officers, and they looked also half starved. Seeing this, rations were immediately brought to them, and those on the surface were surprised that they had canned food already ready for them, along with the ability to simply pop the top open. Thankfully, at least the humans believed it was thankfully, that both sides could handle spoons needed to dig out the contents and make sure they didn't just sit there and lick and possibly cut their tongues on the edge of these cans. Both sides enjoyed their respective meals. Yet they were amazed at the pictures on the side of the cans. Many of them held it up and focused on them as they saw creatures on the side of the cans that looked very much like they do, but not quite. For them, this was freaky, perhaps part of their uncanny valley. As they ate, large tents were set up for medical care, and behind them were tents that seemed to smoke, but it didn't smell like smoke. As they all sniffed the air, they were concerned perhaps these creatures, these, what do they call them, humans, were setting something on fire, but no, they weren't. After eating, each member was brought into these massive tents or into the bays of the ship. Inside, it was a bit strange, as the line of humans just seemed to be standing there waiting, all in some sort of strange garb that seems to be, some sort of woven petroleum, perhaps? They were all told that the process that they were going to have to go through next was very simple. First, they would form a line, and they would stand under an area that would be spraying them with warm water. It wouldn't be rough. It would be quite gentle, as the warm water came down to knock most of the heavy dirt off. After that, they would move to where the humans were stationed, and a substance called flea and tick shampoo will be scrubbed down on them. They would then rinse off with another dose of warm water and finally dip into a hot bath, one that was so warm that it actually seemed to be steaming. A few tried to say screw this and jumped the line and skipped the sequence, going straight into the bath, but were instantly caught by the humans and brought back in line and scolded not to jump. They simply had to wait their turn. Neither side cared for the first part, though the warm shower was not unpleasant. It was just a bit off for them, as this is not something they're used to. Both sides very much enjoyed the next part, as humans scrubbed them down with this same foamy substance. They enjoyed it so much that some refused to leave, as they seemed to be enjoying it, howling or sometimes crying into the sky. And they used something called a brush, or some sort of brush palm thing that these humans had on their hands. Whatever it was, the feel of it scratching down through all the fur was extremely pleasant for them. Eventually, they were told to move on so others could come in, and they were rinsed off again with warm water, which they didn't think was so bad, just not too fun. Yet most of the canine species instinctively tried to shake the water off as soon as it struck them. This seemed to annoy the humans who were there, but many of them had some sort of plastic face shield to make sure they weren't completely drenched. Though on the feline side, they didn't shake the water everywhere. They did fight, however, as they didn't want to take that final dip in the tub, at least at first. You see, the canine species took to it quickly. In fact, many of them decided to swim back and forth, while others just kind of laid there and just breathing in the relaxation, as now they had a full belly and finally they were cleansed. But eventually, both sides realized how good this was, relaxing in this clean water, this warm water, and finally having clean fur for the first time in over a local year. Eventually, they had to get out of the massive bath, which in some cases they had to be dragged out. And after that, humans aided them with toweling off. However, again, the canines would insist on shaking as an instinctive movement. They then had to stand in front of some strange device that released warm air. and this dried the rest of their fur all the way down, and many of them simply stood there just feeling wonderful, feeling alive for the first time in a long time. As they finished up, the leaders of both sides were presented with freshly washed sashes. These sashes are what they wear to mark their authority, marking with different colors and different symbols to make sure that everybody knew what they were, what rank they were. And once they received these decorative pieces, they placed them on and were escorted to a room with several humans sitting there, all with clean, pressed uniforms, freshly shaven faces, which for both of these species seemed to gross them out yet intrigued them at the same time. Everybody was motioned to sit, and the human commander was the first one to raise his voice. Now that everybody's cleaned up and has some food in their gullet, let us discuss how we can come to an arrangement, a peaceful settlement. As soon as he finished these words, all the representatives of both factions immediately began screaming at each other about their rights to the planet and how each side had performed barbarous acts against each other, and back and forth they went, screaming and yelping and screeching and pounding themselves onto the table until the humans stood up. Enough! If you two want to go back into the mud and fight like cats and dogs, we can just pick up everything we have and leave you here. I doubt either of you will last long once your personnel find out that you are the reason why they're left to die slowly from starvation, from drinking bad water, from the hygiene that we finally just fixed off you. He let the words sit for a while before he continued. Now that this matter is settled, let's get to work. Everyone sat down and stayed as respectful as possible, even though there was always some tension in the air. However, it wasn't long before a line was drawn, a treaty was signed, and both sides afterwards simply asked for more rations. This was instantly brought to them, and they were actually surprised that humans didn't eat these rations. They looked and they saw humans pulling something out of strange plastic sacks that they were eating. Something that smelled, in many cases, absolutely abhorrent, and in some cases good, but they had no interest in the human food. They just wanted what was in these metal cans. They realized that pallets worth of these cans were coming out, and now they could eat well. Yet they did have a question as they seen all the pictures on the side, with a canine and feline side by side as they were receiving their rations. One of them simply turns and asks, "We don't understand. This is not human food? If it is not human food, what is this ration called anyway?" The man turned as he handed over the cans and said, "Pet food." It was at this moment that both factions did something simultaneously and together. Both opened their eyes real wide. Both of them dropped their jaws really low, and both shot their tails in the air as they both went, "What?" Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me today on this short story. Before I go, I need to say that today's winner was Brian Kemp. Also, I need to send out some great big thank yous to the supporters of this channel, and those will be Sir Prozac and Pancakes, Brian Kemp, MTF Guard, Erica Gem, and SS Demon. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.